one passing reference to that first reading from the book of Exodus. It does mention there that if you loan money to somebody, don't charge an interest when you get it back. Now that led to a sin we called simony in the church. It was there for many, many years, that if you asked interest on money you loaned, it was considered a serious sin. Now, a very interesting comedy written on this by a fellow named John T. Noonan, who died just in the recent past. He was a Ninth Circuit District Court judge and a very learned man. I'm familiar to a number of jurists who are here in our community. And he wrote a book, marvelous book, called The Church That Can and Cannot Change. I was so impressed by that book when I first read it about 20 years ago or so. I invited John Noonan to come to Holy Family. And he came to Holy Family and he gave an evening lecture about the church that can and cannot change. And one of the changes was to do with this issue of simony. And sometime, if you like some interesting reading about the church that can change and that must change, read John T. Noonan's book, The Church That Can and Cannot Change. Now let me look at this gospel reading. On these two commandments, the whole law and the prophets depend, said Jesus. Love of God and love of neighbor. The love of God comes from Deuteronomy. It comes from the Torah, the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 5. And in the book of Leviticus, which is also a book of the law in the Torah, in chapter 19, the love of neighbor. Although in the Israelite community at the time, the love of neighbor meant the love of the Israelite neighbor. It didn't mean the love of a foreigner. So it was restricted, and clearly in the teaching of Jesus, he expands the understanding of neighbor. You'll remember, who is my neighbor? In chapter 10 in the Gospel of Luke, and Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. So clearly he extends the notion of neighbor into the foreigner. To love your neighbor as yourself. I'd like to look at that for a few moments, what that really means. To love the neighbor as yourself does not mean you're successful, you're intelligent, you're beautiful, you're popular, your powerful self. I heard some important person recently say, I'm very intelligent, I'm highly talented, I am extremely successful. And I say, well, that's not the true person. The real person is beneath. That's a mask. The real person in every one of us is not the public persona. The real person is the person who is broken, unworthy, sinful, sometimes selfish, demanding, insensitive at times, judgmental. That's the real person inside of each and every one of us. So take a deeper look when you begin to reflect on this gospel. Take a deeper look deep inside ourselves. And when we discover this person, if we do, the tendency is to bury this person, this human, broken, sinful person, to bury it, to deny, not to face, not to own it, with good reason. We think that this person is not acceptable to God, and we're embarrassed that this person might be acceptable to others. So we tend to hide the real self beneath the mask of the public image. That's our temptation. The temptation is not to look. And if we do look and find this broken person deep inside ourselves, the temptation is to deny, to bury, to set this aside. And yet, when you meet this person, the real person inside of you, listen carefully, and you will hear the voice of God saying, but you are good, you are lovable, You are made in the image of God. Your real person is made in the image of God. And our sinfulness is the meeting place with God. That's a basic tenet of the whole 12-step program. Until the person says, this is my real person. I am broken. I am addicted. I'm impoverished. I'm powerless. I need a higher power. Only then do we find the love of the real person emerging, and only then do we find a healthy relationship with the true God. Now, Pope Francis, when he began his papacy, he made a public statement, I am a sinner. But popes are not. Popes are saints. We canonize popes. And to our great surprise, he said, I'm not a saint, I'm a sinner. And I said, you give hope to every one of us. I can relate to you, one sinner to the other. Until I accept and face the real person inside of myself, I cannot love my neighbor. I cannot love the wounded person. I can't love the undocumented person. I can't love the person on death row. I can't love the public sinner, the one who imposes on me, the one who demands from me. I can't love this person because I haven't faced my own real person, and therefore I may give myself a dispensation to make judgments based on my false self. I may exclude people. I may put people down. I may separate people even in my own family, in the church, because I haven't faced my own sinfulness. In 1975, I was working down at the Archdiocese, and I was moving the circles of power in the world of ecclesiology at the time. And I was a young Monsignor. I was full of myself. I mean, I was a very important person. At least I thought I was. And then I met this wonderful, holy, extraordinary Jesuit priest. And he became my spiritual director. For 26 years, I saw him every 3 weeks. Went to confession every 3 weeks. Did many, many retreats with him. And for all the times I was on my knees, confessing my sins and my brokenness, whenever I finished my confession, John would say, but you're good. And at the beginning, tears came to my eyes. I said, I'm not good. Don't tell me I'm good. And he said, but you're good. And in due time, he will convince me that even in my utter weakness and brokenness, I am in the image of God, and I don't have to hide my humanity. What would happen if the church faced its brokenness? What would happen to the church if we faced our sinfulness? We are now celebrating 500 years, October 31st, which is coming right up here. That was the date on which Martin Luther posted his thesis in Wittenberg, and this began the great movement of the Reformation. But what might have happened if Rome, if the church said, we are weak, we are broken, we are sinful, we need to be reformed? What might have happened? What might happen to us if we faced our weakness and loved ourselves in our poverty? Whenever you find a church which is judgmental, severe, when you find people within the church who can exclude other people, I believe the church and that person has not faced the true self. You know, we have been well said, I think, we have a public persona, then we have kind of a domestic persona, private person, then we have a secret person. The secret person, that's the real person. The private person, you learn a little bit. And this is mostly when we're at home. Because when we're out, we're fabulous and beautiful. We're on our best behavior. When we're at home, that's when you find out who you are. And if you into a confessional mode, and you really look deep inside your person, you're looking at the private person. That's the real person. When you get to that person, you renew your faith that in this condition on sinfulness and brokenness, you are lovable. You are loved by God. You are vulnerable. So vulnerable that you can experience the true love that God has for you. You don't have to perform. You don't have to earn. You don't have to impress. It's free. But it's only given to those who do not have to earn it. It's the free gift of God's embrace given to the true person, the broken, struggling, sinful person. In C.S. Lewis's Four Loves, worth reading, deals with the 4 Greek words for love. And he says this: to love is to be vulnerable. If you want to keep your heart intact, you must therefore give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket of your selfishness. And in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The only place outside of heaven where you are perfectly safe from the danger of love is hell. And so I, Clem Connolly, a sinner, I am safe in the hands of the God who loves me. And my prayer is that the love of God will never allow me to exclude anyone from the church rooted in Jesus Christ. Amen.